The rule is basically that it's not going to deliver ballots to any state that doesn't comply with Trump's requirements. Can you imagine that you're basically putting the United States Postal Service in charge of our in the way of our sacred right to vote and participate?
There is some hyperbolic rhetoric to this. The USPS isn't deciding voter eligibility. They've made that clear in the rule. However, this can delay and even block voters from getting a ballot. To your point, it is important that people take a deep breath because there's still time. This rule is not enforced yet.
All right, welcome back to Independent Voter Podcast. We got Cara and Sean today. We don't know where Ethan is. Maybe he's working from home. I don't know. I don't know what these 20-somethings do these days.
Slackers.
Yeah, I don't know. Then again, he could also have been up till like 3 a.m, like building some crazy tech stuff because he's known to do that too.
That's likely, yeah.
So we don't know, but he's lost. The point is he's not here. So you're stuck with us. But we got some good stuff going on today. I mean, in the national news, you got all the scuttlebutt of, the Trump administration has now partnered. They're using the USPS to get the tentacles into election laws. I'm most excited about California. I'm not sure folks understand how just landmark this new bill that was introduced is. And Cara, you got a few things to talk about today too, right?
Sure. I mean, I think we should get right into it, talking about the United States Postal Service. Basically, they finalized a rule this week, to restrict the mail-in ballots. They're saying now that they're not going to deliver ballots to any state that doesn't comply with giving their voter rolls to the feds. So they're gonna and they basically published the rule, and the Supreme Court ruled then yesterday or the day before yesterday that the rule hasn't been finalized yet, so that they're not going to rule. And it really just throws into chaos this whole mail-in balloting that's about to happen in November. People aren't going to know if they mail their ballot in, is it actually going to get sent to the state who doesn't give its stuff to the Trump administration. It's crazy.
I don't know. My take on this one, you guys always give me crap because I'm always playing, I'm always defending some of this stuff. But I want to step back. You have all these conversations. Okay, is this to do? Are there citizen voters or are there not? Oh, let's step back and take your most, is this a conservative, solid Republican position? I mean, they're usually the ones that are championing the 10th Amendment, which is,
state
rights and everything. Yeah. We're talking about elections. Okay. So forget this particular issue. This is use of the power and force of the federal government, including its apparatuses on a massive scale to have a hand in elections. And I'm not saying there's not righteousness on there. There's not some things that are right or wrong or whatever. Let's assume there's lots of bad things going on in the election, just for assumption's sake. I just don't understand. I'm a Republican. One day, the Democrats are going to be back in control.
Yeah.
And they are the ones setting the precedent for the federal government to, right?
Not accept the votes from red states.
Okay, so what is it? What is that? What are they then going to use the power and force of the federal government to impose another restriction?
That's
and
what
another
I mean.
restriction.
That's what I mean.
Right. At what point do conservatives start being conservatives again? And look, I'm not attacking Trump. I've defended a lot of the stuff, right? I think he's gone too far on anything. But this is one area where even on Trump's own rhetoric, and then on the foundational, what does it mean to be a conservative? That there's absolute crickets on the Republican side about, holy cow, this is using the power and force of government. I've always said, if the federal government takes over, this is why elections are so state-oriented, time, place, manner, right? Federal government stays out. Because once the voting apparatus goes to the federal government, there's an argument to me, Republicans like making slippery slope arguments too. There's an argument to make. The states are gone.
Right.
Because it's the United States of America, not United Cities of America.
Right.
Not United States of America. If you take the voting apparatus and let the federal government get its tentacles in there, that then becomes a political football. every single administration to have its hand in the most fundamental thing to our democracy, our election process.
Right. And when
that's my totally unbiased
right.
opinion.
Right. And when it comes to this Postal Service rule, there are some important things to clarify because there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions after the Supreme Court made their decision on Monday saying,
Right.
oh, this is going to create chaos in election administration. And there is a possibility that it could. But right now, it's also important to note that still the rule isn't in place. The final rule was issued on August 21st, which is before the Supreme Court said, well, when the states filed their lawsuit in California v. Trump, it was before an actual rule existed. So then this has been explained in the media already that because they filed a lawsuit when Trump had only directed the Postal Service to make a rule, then the federal courts have no say in what you want someone to do. They can only rule on what a law says or what a rule states. And so now,
but let's break that down.
Right.
Sean, I mean, that basically means, okay, I get it that they can't rule on something unless it's a final rule. So the post office put up this rule, and now that goes through like a rule making, and there's going to be hearings or whatever they're going to be, and then it'll be the final rule. And at that point, the court would, issue would be ripe, and the Supreme Court would say yay or nay. But at that point, like, we're how much closer to the election?
Well, right. We're a month or we're 2 months away from the election. And so
from when the ballots get mailed out, and
so what the Supreme Court did was remove one preliminary injunction. It's important to note, and this is not being said in the mainstream media, is that there were two preliminary injunctions, nationwide injunctions against this. The Supreme Court only struck down one of those injunctions, and that was in Trump v. California. There is a case involving the League of Women Voters, though, that also has a preliminary injunction that hasn't been touched yet. And so the DOJ is trying to get the judge. It's the same judge in both cases. So
how does Sean know everything?
Hey, it's just Sean. When you don't come on the podcast, we're just
Well, no, I spent hours looking into this yesterday. Even as I was writing the article explaining all this on IVN, right, there were still updates to this. So it's the same judge in both cases doing two separate injunctions. One of those injunctions has been removed. The other's still in place. And even the USPS rule says that until the government gets relief from the injunctions, it's not going to enforce or actually implement this rule. And it's
and the rule is basically that it's not going to deliver ballots to any state that doesn't comply with Trump's requirements.
So the rule is that when election offices send out ballots, if those ballots or mail ballots, do not comply with the rules on processing and data requirements, then they're going to send it back to the elections office. They're not going to send it to voters. So based on any sort of technical issue, the USPS could decide to send that ballot back and not give it to voters.
Can you imagine that you're basically putting the United States Postal Service in charge of our in the way of our sacred right to vote and participate?
Well, right. Well, there is some hyperbolic rhetoric to this. First of all, the USPS is not deciding voter eligibility.
There's no hyperboles today. Nobody speaks in hyperbole.
Yeah. But the USPS isn't deciding voter eligibility. They've made that clear in the rule. However, this can delay and even block voters from getting a ballot, to your point. So, so what the Supreme Court did say, and they left this open, was, okay, so the states, you filed this too early, but now that there is a rule in place, file another lawsuit, you'll get a preliminary injunction, and it's always, the Supreme Court just could decide not to interfere in that preliminary injunction. So the process could be a lot quicker than you think, but...
Can I go on 2 quick tangents?
Go ahead. Go for it.
We're all
First tangent. First tangent. Okay. For those of you listening at home, you may be coming in here. You're like, oh, I'm learning something. I actually co-host the show because I figure out what's going on by co-hosting with Sean.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's what's going on right now as we're talking.
Yeah.
Second, I think there's an interesting correlate because if you're talking about in like now the illicit market space. You may not know this, but the USPS carries an incredible amount of illicit products. Why do they do that? Because you have to have a warrant to search USPS mail, right? They don't use FedEx and USPS, right? Because you don't need a warrant to open up a
Okay.
So the illicit market. I don't know
Meaning,
what
like,
the connection I made. All I'm saying is here's the irony, right? The USPS carries all this illicit product and stuff because people will mail it because they need a warrant and stuff, and the USPS is just carrying it willy-nilly. Now we're talking about the right to vote, and suddenly we're going, we can leverage the USPS because there might be some people in some states or whatever, like,
Right.
I mean, why don't we focus that attention on figuring out how the USPS stops being the carrier of more illicit products than all the cartels combined?
Right. Yeah, it's really true. It's because they don't really, they're trying to figure out, and I guess I'm going to say it, the Republican Party or the Trump administration is trying to figure out how to manipulate the elections.
Well,
Right?
the party has an interest to limit mail-in voting because they believe that ultimately that will help their chances in November if they could suppress that. But they already know, based on previous court rulings, that Trump nor the Republican Congress can touch mail-in voting in a lot of states because it is the right of the states to decide how they administer elections.
Exactly, the time and the place and the manner of elections.
It is fair to say that they are trying to work around that. However, with all the panic that's going on, it is important that people take a deep breath because there's still time. This rule is not enforced yet. And I will say this, that a lot of election officials have pointed out, when you make such an extreme change to how elections are administered, considering that 2/3 of voters now vote by mail, right? This close to an election.
Think there's no Republicans that vote by mail? Like,
what
are they thinking?
The National Organization of Election Officials, already sent a letter to the USPS saying, and this was back in July when there was still, 3 months till the election, right? That it's impossible to expect election officials and even USPS employees to learn the new procedures and get it down and make sure all this is in place, especially since a lot of states, they purchase the envelopes that they're going to use for November months ahead. So, it's one of those things where I feel like at the end of the day, the courts are not going to allow this simply because of how close it is to the election. But it's one of those things where obviously just wait and see. All right. But there's
also, I just don't understand how they think they can weed out the people who are Republicans who are voting by mail are somehow going to get their votes through, but the Democrats aren't. Like, I don't understand how they think this is going to work or help them at all, except for, I guess, sowing doubt in the whole process. For some reason, they seem to want to sow doubt in this whole process. And I guess that's because if they lose, they need to have a reason to say we lost because the other side cheated by voting by mail. Is that it?
Well,
is that really?
I don't know. The other side's not a bunch of saints over there, but
I know for sure the other side is not a bunch of saints. You're totally right about that too, Chad. But this is beyond the pale.
Right. I like it when Cara says I'm totally right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But I mean, for me, the point is, there's no reason to panic about chaos. I know there's a lot of rhetoric out there about that, but for now, the USPS rule is not being implemented just yet. It could be. And, obviously there is a concern that those who wanted this in place will try to take what the Supreme Court said. They'll interpret it incorrectly or in their favor and try to get away with other stuff. But
then is it too late? Okay. So I know we have to move on, but
she just does not take cues. Hey, let's move on. We just beat this horse to death.
All right. I just don't get how anybody thinks this is a good idea. It just feels like a waste of time and it's going to sow more chaos. And we just don't need that right now. We need people to have faith in our elections, guys.
You need to focus on the growing tomato menace.
and
Right.
focus on the growing tomato.
And we
mess, which, by the
we can
way-
focus on the good news that we have in California, right? We have great news out of California. So.
What's the great news?
We do have really great news in California. California's ACA 24, the Right to Vote Amendment. It's a new constitutional amendment. It was introduced in the California Assembly 2 days ago by Stephanie Wynn. And how many others?
There are 13
like literally
others now.
leadership in it. So
14 members of the Assembly.
For context, okay, we're telling the story here because like nobody, even people in the Capitol and people in politics, like they don't even believe this, but we do. We've been talking about it since it began. Like go back, listen to our other podcasts. It's like the news is like totally missing. They think like these things just happen out of the blue, right? What happened was in California, there was some people, I don't know if I should name names or not, but I'll probably drop their names later. They literally orchestrated.
Their names are Steve Maviglio, Paul Mitchell. There's like
now
these
we're really dropping names. Sorry,
Ron Naring. So it's like these Republican
These are not
operatives.
personal attacks. This is just the truth. This is what happened. I would invite them literally to come on the show. I actually think as people, they're all good people. They have their own agendas. They have all this stuff.
God bless them.
But let's be honest about what they did. Right.
So these are Democratic and Republican political operatives who are basically trying to take away the right to vote of 6 million Californians by doing this thing called undo the top two.
And they're not looking at it as a rights to vote issue. They're just consultants. They're political operatives. They live in their bubbles and they're going, this nonpartisan primary really upsets things. It makes it harder for us. Like we end up with having more fights within our party. We can't coalesce the money. We don't know who's going to win until the voters actually decide. So let's undo the top two. And they ran all their polling and all their polling shows. Well, this is going to be hard because people really like open primaries. They like being able to choose who they're in. So they focus on undo the top two. So they run this poll on the governor's race and go, well, this is early in the race when the Democrats haven't consolidated and everything. And so you have Hilton and Chad Bianco as number 1 and 2 with like 17 and 16% of the vote, right? Which is like
when there's still the 25%
which is the ceiling of how many total Republicans.
Exactly.
They 100% know this, right?
Of course
but for them, they go, look, we can write the story in the poll showing that if the election were held today, we'd have 2 Republicans, then voters would have to choose a Republican. And in California, we could have a Republican government.
Right.
Which,
so then they put it all out into
theoretically
the press,
has a grain of truth, but they all know is total bullshit and it's not going to happen. But they feed it to media folks.
Everyone.
And they just eat it up.
Absolutely.
I mean, how many people in our reform community are going, oh my God, do you think there's going to be a Republican governor in California? And every time we're like, it's never going to happen. No.
Of course not. Of course not.
Steve Maviglio and Paul Mitchell and all this stuff are stirring the pot and they're doing their job. They're getting media to take the bait. They're getting people to flip out. They're getting funders to go, oh my God, we got to stop this onslaught, right?
They got the chairman of the Democratic Party to call on fellow Democrats who were experienced, Democrats to drop out. They got Rusty Hicks to call Javier Becerra and say you should drop out of the race.
Think about how absurd. He called on who is now going to be the next governor of California to drop out. He basically called on all the minority candidates.
Correct.
This is the Democratic Party said, hey, remember?
All that minority experienced. Most experienced candidates.
Guys, all of you get out of the race because we got to consolidate behind who?
Behind Eric Swalwell.
Behind Eric Swalwell. It's just like does it? Come on, man! Like there should be like a what is it called, a telenova about this, right? It's like you guys, okay, and then so people think, oh, Steve Maviglio just suddenly out of the blue decided to file this undo the top two initiative that stirred up more scuttlebutt, right?
That's right.
No, this is all coordinated attack. And then Lorena Gonzalez gives her quote from the Labor Federation, right? I support, we should get,
we should get rid of the top two. We should definitely disenfranchise.
The very same day. Okay, so if there's two like political nemesis in California, like, people, and I actually like them both. I like Lorena and I like the next figure that's going to come in here on personal levels. Like they have redeeming qualities. Like,
of course.
Right? But
and they're just
if you're going to put up the Barack Obama, Donald Trump of California, it's going to be Lorena Gonzalez and Carl DeMaio. So who joins Lorena
They
Gonzalez,
both-
Stephen Viglio, Paul Mitchell, but Carl DeMaio, right? Who is now enemy number one on the voting ID issue with the Democrats. But now they're partners. We're going to undo the top two.
Right.
This
Right.
is
so you have the people who are the highest up in the Democratic Party establishment and the people who are the highest up in the Republican Party establishment basically becoming friends and colluding to lock out all the NPP voters in California from being able to participate. It's literally 6 million people.
They're trying to do this. They're still trying to do this, by the way, after record turnout in California.
Right.
The highest primary turnout.
Right? Let's put this, for those of you listening, like put this in context, okay? There's all this scuttlebutt in all the national news is, oh my God, the world's gone socialist because New York has now elected all these socialists who are now going to be we haven't even had the general election yet, okay? New York's voter turnout was like 9%. Let's be generous and say it was 10%. And this is they have closed primaries at the municipal level.
Right.
So, okay. So you have
Mamdani was elected by like fewer than 10%.
And I'm not casting anything on Mamdani. I'm just saying the reality of how people get elected, right? Is this single digits % of active people that came out and voted in the primary.
Which is how the Democrats and Republicans want to keep it.
So what was California's turnout?
41%.
Over 41%.
On June 2nd.
More than 4 times the number of people. And
because it's open.
In order to advance, you don't just have to everybody can vote for anybody.
Correct.
Right?
And anybody can run.
So put that into context. These folks that live in their partisan political bubbles and can't step back and read the Constitution that says, we the people elect our representatives, say, oh, we don't like that there was uncertainty in California, which means what? What does uncertainty mean? What does uncertainty mean? It means the voters are deciding and us political operatives can't figure it out.
They drives them crazy.
Wait, we don't want voters to have this much control.
Yeah.
We need to figure it out. So we're going to file this undo the top two thing where we disagree with each other on absolutely everything. But how about these silly 5.2 million NPP voter turnout, which increased their share of the voter percentage from 21 to 23% in a single election cycle? The margin of voters. So Democrats and Republicans turned out in higher numbers by about 30%.
Okay.
NPPs and Latinos had almost a 60% marginal increase and almost double that of partisan voters. Mm-hmm. There's 2 groups of voters that are responsible for that massive increase in turnout in California. NPPs,
Latino.
And Latinos.
Yeah.
Well, often their semicircles overlap quite a bit because Latinos are
independent.
Right. So now we'll go put this into the Democratic Party. Everybody's a racist context. You have the party chair told all the Latinos to drop out of the race and is now part of Carl DeMaio's coalition to get rid of the right to vote for
a huge percentage of Latinos.
Election. Who's the largest? Latinos are by far the most likely to register as independent.
Which is maybe why the right to vote amendment getting introduced in the California Assembly 2 days ago is huge. And so here's what it is, guys. It would guarantee every single voter, regardless of party preference, the right to vote in all publicly funded and administered elections. It would codify that in the state constitution, that the right to vote, it derives from being a citizen. It doesn't derive from being a party affiliate, from affiliating with a party. So the lead author, her name is Stephanie Huynh. She's a Democrat. She's from Elk Grove. She's carrying this amendment. It's notable because all these other Democrats are defending the top 2 primary structure.
Well, it's not even really defending the top 2. They're just defending the fundamental right to vote.
It's worth noting that this amendment doesn't mention top 2 at all. But now, obviously with the Undo the Top 2 campaign has come out and encouraged the legislative leadership to vote no on an amendment that just enshrines the right to vote to all citizens in publicly funded elections. That's what it does.
That's why they call it Undo the Top 2. They don't say undo the nonpartisan right to vote.
They don't say they're cut out 6 million people from voting.
go back to closed primaries where you have to join a party to vote, which is what it will do. They say undo the top two. Why? Because we ran this poll that said we might end up with 2 Republicans in a California election. And that's very scary, people.
Yes.
Very, very scary.
Terrifying.
That is what they do. And so, look, Paul, Maviglio, you guys, I would love to have Demaya come on the show anytime. Let's just have an honest discussion. I know you're not bad people. I'm just like, but put into self-reflect for a second and think about what you're doing. And then put yourself in the shoes of an NPP voter who has said, look, doesn't mean I'm against your party. I just don't want to join your party. And explain to them that you think you should take their tax dollars, administer an election with the state of California, and tell those voters, hold on, you're not allowed to participate yet because you haven't saluted to one of our 2 parties.
Right.
Explain.
You can come in November,
self-reflect on
but
that.
Don't come to the most important stage of the election.
Because this is our election. It belongs to us. We have entered a privileged status by virtue of being affiliated with these 2 great parties that everybody's so satisfied with across the country.
Oh yeah, people are so satisfied with the Democrats and the Republicans right now. Like they're something like 120, 130% negative ratings combined. Between the 2 parties.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But somehow we're the opposition.
Somehow. But, it's exciting because so Stephanie Huynh got how many people to join her? So 13 of her colleagues.
Pretty much
and they're
the entire breadth of the Democratic. We have there's the Progressive Caucus leaders, there's the Latino Caucus leaders, the Black Caucus leaders, the Problem Solvers Caucus leaders, the Mod Caucus leaders.
All on this.
They're all here.
They're all
the
on
Asian
ACA.
Caucus leaders, they're all have joined us, which is, I think, something to say, look, it's a simple statement that your right to vote derives from citizenship and not joining a party. But people have to understand the power and influence of the political operatives and the special interests that want to control the election. What would have happened but for some leadership from assembly members like Stephanie Huynh and Lori Wilson and
Anna Marie Farias, David Alvarez, but for them coming out there, and there's no way it's going to pass in 2026. But what they did was they stuck a flag and said, "I'm a proud Democrat, but I also believe in the right to vote, right? And no, I'm not joining whatever forces in our party that are convincing Rusty Hicks to tell people like Becerra, who ended up winning, to get out of the race. And Villaraigosa.
And all them to get out of the race. I'm not joining the forces that say the pathway to power in California is to exclude people from having a meaningful vote.
Great.
I'm going to stand on the side that says, I'm going to convince people who may not be part of my party that they should vote for me because I will best represent them, not because I've championed my own party's platform and made everybody in my own party as happy as can be.
One thing I just want to say before we move on is that Blanca Pacheco, who is the
Rules Committee chair,
head of the Rules Committee, I have a story coming out on her in the next couple of days just about the power of what it means to be the head of the Rules Committee in California. She has a tremendous amount of power to decide sort of what moves forward and what dies. And I was really happy to see that she joined as a co-author of ACA 24.
Right.
So, shout out to
which is the other
Pacheco.
thing in this partisan world. Like you always, I understand people who aren't early in politics, like they think, there's all these people that are just like pitchforks and this and that, and they're a Democrat, they must agree with this rigid set of ideas. It's like, no, there's people like Stephanie Huynh and Blanca Pacheco and Lori Wilson who are in there trying to do the hard work of governance. And I think they're connecting this right to vote with the ability to say, no, government isn't about going in there, championing some rigid line position, and then telling everybody that doesn't agree with them they're idiot. Actually, government's the opposite. It's going, hey, my friends sent me here who agree with me on a lot of this stuff. How can we govern together so I can go back to my friends and saying, hey, here's how we need to do it, because here's these other perspectives, and here's how we came to this resolution, and let me explain to you why we didn't get every single thing we wanted, because the only time you get everything you wanted is when you go and you fight a war. right? It's like,
Right.
and the whole point of government is to avoid that, right?
Right. Right. All right. So moving on, can we talk about the Pentagon firing the Stars and Stripes? So we're journalists. The Pentagon this week fired Stars and Stripes editor Eric Slavin and Middle East reporter Lara Court. They said that they were insubordinates because they were defending Stars and Stripes, which is the newspaper for the military for their independence. They were reporting on, I believe, the USS Abraham Lincoln, which was out at sea for something like 270 days without docking in the middle of a war zone. And some of our servicemen were jumping overboard trying to commit suicide. It's not just that they didn't have fresh lettuce on board. The conditions on the ship got to such a point. And anyway, these reporters were reporting on it, and they got fired. The publisher announced his retirement. The editor-in-chief, the Middle East reporter, they're all fired. Stars and Stripes goes back all the way to the Civil War. It has served military communities since World War II. And its editorial independence is protected by the Congress, despite the fact that it has this Pentagon funding. But anyway, this is, again, the government taking away the power of journalists to report on a story. The Pentagon has already kicked reporters out of the Pentagon. They already don't get to be in, certain ones unless they sign something. They can't even be in the press briefings at the Pentagon in this country anymore. Like, what is happening to the free press, Chad? Sean.
It's another First Amendment issue. Right to free press, right to non-association, right. A lot of these things are under attack. But that's okay. That's the history of the American experience, right? We advance, we confront these walls, and we're going to overcome them, right? Or am I just being overly optimistic?
I mean,
it's very hard,
understand.
when you work for an open platform like IVN, where as long as you substantiate your claims, we're free to publish whatever, right?
We'll
You're free to
publish
submit,
what you send us. Yes,
yeah, you'll
as
send
long as-
us.
Sean says that only out of fear of being fired by the IVP board.
That's
I do,
right.
yeah.
He actually doesn't have
Yeah.
editorial independence unless he's
has
really
the IVP
independent.
board ever once called you and said, like, not public, like, oh, hey, you got to take that down, or you got to do that?
Obviously there have been some times where they're like, hey, I think if to be a little bit more objective, you need to phrase something a certain or different way. And obviously we're always open. I'm always open to that sort of critique. Our other writers are. If you feel like we are saying something that is not correct or phrased incorrectly, then absolutely we're open to edit. But I've never been told not to publish anything on IVN. Right.
Or if it's sort of more of an op-ed or a commentary piece, then it's marked as an op-ed or a commentary piece.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. So, like, on IBM, we believe bias exists with everybody, right? There's no such thing as neutral journalism,
Correct.
and so like it's a matter
as soon as
of
somebody says I'm unbiased, they just bullshit.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
Bullshit meter.
So our favorite attorney general in Texas, we talk about him all the time. He's definitely one of Chad's favorites. His name is Ken Paxton. He's the nominee for U.S. Senate, and he's running against this guy James Tallarico, who's a Democrat. And believe it or not, people are saying that a Democrat might be able to win, that Tallarico might be able to win a Senate seat in Texas, which would be, they haven't had.
My viewpoint is, Democrat might win because Ken Paxton, right? My bias, speaking of bias, is super biased opinion, right? You got Ken Paxton runs in a primary saying, I'm going to close.
Exactly.
This in Texas situations, like, they have a different history than California.
They do.
History.
Right.
They have a history. They've never registered. This is a very proud, they had the Alamo. Okay, these are Ken Paxton's position, right? And I'll invite Ken Paxton to come on and explain
Sure.
this
Welcome.
state that has never told the state, never had to register their party with the state. He wants to close the primaries in Texas, which requires voters to to tell the state government which private party they're affiliated with, right?
So right now in Texas, no matter who you are, you're just a person who's registered to vote, who's an American citizen, who's a resident of Texas, a citizen of Texas. Yeah. You're allowed to go vote in Texas. And the attorney general, the chief lawmaker, the candidate for Senate, the Republican who's running against this James Tallarico is saying, nope.
Yeah, he's taking the side. Yeah, he's taking the side of his party against the lawsuit against the state.
Capital R party. But imagine you're a libertarian leaning Republican, right? Yeah. In Texas, right? Yeah. I'm not talking about a California libertarian, a Texas libertarian leaning government. And say, you're telling me I got to go and tell the government what party I'm a part of. Right? I've never had to do that before.
Listen to Chad's Texas accent.
I think it's pretty good. I have a lot of cowboys in my family, though, actually. I have some cowboy credentials.
But,
so
Go ahead, Sean.
So Kim Paxton obviously has a lot of ethical corruption issues in his past.
Correct.
He's been found by the state legislature to be guilty of using his office to enrich himself, which is again part of this. He's sided with the Republican Party. He was indicted and because he served sways in the Senate. Yeah, he was able to keep his position. Anyway, so he is sided with his party who sued the state over their open primaries law.
Yeah.
He, as the attorney general, it is his job to defend the state against lawsuits, but instead chose to side and join the lawsuit of the GOP, leaving the Secretary of State, which at the time was Jay Nelson, to defend the law. Also a Republican. And it's worth noting that the new Secretary of State, also a Republican, is holding the line just as Jay Nelson did, said, if you want to close the primaries, you got to go through the legislature. But clearly, the legislature knows how unpopular moving to that sort of system is. Partly to your point, Chad, about how they have a history of, the state is not going to track you what party you're affiliated with. That's the freedom to just register and vote however you want. But also a growing number of independents in that state, the 2 to 3 million in that state, that would then be denied access to these critical elections. So they understand the consequences.
I just have to say about this Ken Paxton, the person who is the attorney general of the state, who's supposed to follow all the laws. So this is what's happening with him right now. There's security video from 2013. Somehow someone got a hold of this. And basically Paxton is walking through one of those metal detectors at a courthouse. And he sees that there's this beautiful $1,000 Mont Blanc pen. It doesn't belong to him, but it's in the tray and it's on camera. He steals the pen of a fellow lawyer, $1,000 pen, puts it in his pocket. And Tallarico's campaign now is basically selling pens that cost $6 that say not Ken Paxton's pen. It's this funny thing that it's just a small thing. It's just a pen and it's just some video recording, but it says a lot about, this guy is, can you imagine stealing somebody's beautiful, it's just stealing a pen?
I can't imagine a pen costing $1,000. So that's.
Okay. That too. What the heck? And that was in 2013. It's probably a $2,000 pen now. Probably has tariffs on it now,
Meanwhile, Lena's working on a formal work complaint because we're going over her schedule again.
All right.
I got to deal with that again.
Okay, we'll be done. We'll be done.
That's our former, actually, she's still Colombian too, but our Colombian American.
It was fun having Lena on the podcast last week.
That was great. She's coming back.
She should come back. Right. She's better than us.
But no, thanks everybody again. I mean, we've been getting lots of feedback. Obviously, we're excited about some of the independent voter projects. Got the bill in there, and all this stuff. Everything is related. It's you folks that have been involved and being a part of the social media and supporting us and donating and following the show, and then telling some of your friends and how many times have we heard people going, oh, I saw that or I heard that or but we really appreciate all of our listeners. We appreciate when you give us feedback. You send us an email, you put a comment on social media. So subscribe to the podcast wherever. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to it there. If you're listening to us right now on Spotify or Apple, subscribe there. Doesn't matter. Sign up for our newsletter if you're not already. We're growing fast. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming up for this general election. Obviously, we're going to have some big news coming out of New York here very shortly, but I can't blow the lid on that one
Next
yet.
week.
But stay tuned, subscribe, join us, call our bullshit, do all that kind of stuff, and we'll see you next time. So thanks, everybody.
This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.